In the quiet farmland of southwestern Ontario, nestled between the small communities of Delmer and Cornersville, there once stood a place known as Laurence Junction, or simply Laurence. By all official accounts today, it never existed. It does not appear on modern maps. There are no plaques, no ruins, no entries in regional historical registries. It has been erased. But it was real. According to records retrieved from deep within military archives, Laurence was once a small industrial settlement founded in the late 1800s. With a railway junction connecting minor freight lines, it served as a logistical midpoint for agricultural goods and textile shipments. By 1914, its population numbered just over 400 residents, most of whom lived in modest homes around a central station, a church, a schoolhouse, and a textile processing facility. Everything changed on June 10th, 1915. That night, the town ceased to exist, not just physically, but bureaucratically, geographically, historically. It vanished from maps, census data, postal routes, and memory. The disappearance of Laurence has never been officially explained, and no mainstream historical account acknowledges the event. In 1983, a retired civil archivist named Thomas Cleary discovered an old government packet misfiled under Canadian Department of Rail Infrastructure. Inside were two documents stamped with red ink. EV9 classified do not release. The contents referenced an emergency operation involving the evacuation and nullification of Laurence Junction Region 47C pursuant to Protocol EV9. Cleary's findings were quietly dismissed by officials. When he attempted to publish his findings in a regional history journal, the submission was blocked. The editorial board claimed the materials were unverifiable and potentially fabricated. Cleary himself would later state in a taped interview, "They told me to stop asking questions. That's when I knew Laurence was real." He died 2 years later of a reported heart attack. His personal archive, however, survived and was eventually leaked online by researchers investigating obscure Canadian rail disasters. Among the surviving papers was a 1,911 Canadian census page listing the town of Laurence with 426 residents. Yet, in the 1,921 census, not only is the town missing, none of the individuals previously listed could be traced elsewhere. Their names do not reappear in death registries, marriage licenses, land deeds, or immigration records. They simply disappeared. One of the few individuals whose name surfaced in multiple files was Herbert McCrae, listed as a railway foreman residing at Station Street, Laurence. A copy of a letter addressed to him, dated June 12, 1915, reads, "Mr. McCrae, evacuation is confirmed. You are hereby prohibited from returning to Laurence or entering Region 47C. Any breach constitutes a risk to national security. Compensation for your losses has been approved by the Ministry of Interior. Further inquiries are restricted." The signature is illegible. The header reads only, "Government of Canada Emergency Division." At the heart of this mystery lies a code, EV9. Its meaning is still unknown, but one surviving document hints at its scope. It is a logistics chart dated June 9, 1915, showing a train route terminating at Laurence Junction. The shipment is labeled cargo type, compartmentalized, status, sealed, origin, experimental development facility, NB4. Red ink annotation, secure per EV9, authorization level 6, Jiaon. There is no record of any NB4 facility within Canadian military history. Some researchers believe it may have referred to New Brunswick Site 4, an alleged weapons testing ground that has long been denied by the Canadian government. Other fragments of evidence paint an increasingly eerie picture. A handwritten letter by a local farmer, Rebecca Hartley, dated June 11, 1915, and addressed to her sister in Toronto, reads, "There were lights all night. A train thundered through the barley fields, no lanterns, just that horrible whistle. Then came the silence. Mr. Dell said the army came and told them to leave, said the air wasn't safe. They left everything. No one has seen Laurence since." This letter was recovered from a personal collection held in a farmhouse 30 miles from where Laurence once stood. The envelope is stamped with a regional code that no longer exists. Zone 47CR. The Canadian postal system officially denies the use of such coding. The regional railway logbooks, meanwhile, offer another clue. June 10th, 1915, shows a last-minute unscheduled delivery marked only as NB4 LJ Urgent Class X. The entry is crossed out in thick black ink. Every other log for that week remains intact. In the decades following the disappearance, no formal investigation has ever been launched. Attempts to include Laurence in provincial historical registries have been repeatedly rejected. A 1,992 submission by the Ontario Historical Mapping Project was denied due to insufficient verifiable evidence of settlement. Ironically, the same project contained photographs from 1,912, clearly showing the town, including a visible train station with the sign Laurence Junction. But the most unsettling detail may lie in what little remains of the town's location today. Researchers who have visited the supposed coordinates of Laurence report nothing more than flat fields, unnaturally quiet. Some claim GPS devices lose signal within a 1-kilometer radius of the site. Drones malfunction, phones crash, recordings return with long stretches of static. One such visit, recorded in 2017, captured nearly an hour of video from a handheld camcorder. In the footage, as the camera pans across the empty terrain, an isolated structure appears in the background, a tall iron post with corroded bolts at its base, partially overtaken by weeds. When the team returned the next day to document it further, the post was gone. No tracks, no indentation, no evidence it had ever stood there. One researcher, a former military technician named Craig Delaney, analyzed audio recorded on site. Among stretches of ambient silence, he identified a faint distortion, a low, layered murmur. After digital enhancement, the filtered message resembled words. According to Delaney, it sounded like, "They took us, don't forget." The recording has never been independently verified. What exactly was transported to Laurence that day remains unknown. Whether it was biological, chemical, experimental, or something else entirely, no official source has ever confirmed the existence of a dangerous payload. But the appearance of Protocol EV9 in multiple documents, always connected to restricted zones or emergencies, suggests a government-level response to something deemed uncontrollable. Some believe Laurence was the site of an accidental release of experimental materials. Others believe the town was a testing ground for a classified weapon, and when the test failed, erasure was the only option. A darker theory claims the residents were forcibly relocated, identities changed, lives rewritten so thoroughly that no trace remains. What is certain, however, is this. On the night of June 10th, 1915, a town vanished. Its residents never returned, and the country never asked why. Following the unexplained disappearance of Laurence in 1915, the event faded into obscurity. Yet across the 20th century, scattered attempts to resurrect the story began to emerge, almost always followed by silence, rejection, or unexplained withdrawal. In 1956, A local historian named Margaret Ellesmere published a brief reference to Laurence in a rural Ontario almanac. The passage was small, just 4 lines under a section titled Lost Settlements. It read, Laurence Junction, once a vibrant railway town, evacuated and dismantled under military order in 1915. Reason, undisclosed. Area remains unoccupied. Within 2 months, all copies of the almanac were recalled and replaced with a revised edition, the section removed entirely. Ellesmere was contacted by representatives of what she described only as a federal safety board and asked to surrender her research. When she refused, her home was raided under a fabricated tax investigation. Her notes were seized. She never published again. In the 1970s, new interest surfaced with the declassification of certain military records related to wartime logistics. A team from McGill University, led by Professor Dr. Charles Renner, uncovered partial references to EV-9 containment drills conducted in southwestern Ontario during 1915. Though the records did not name Laurence, the coordinates mentioned matched the area precisely. Renner submitted a formal request for expanded access under the National Archives Act. The response was swift. All materials related to Operation EV-9 remain classified under National Security Exemption Clause 48B. Further inquiry is discouraged. Weeks later, the university received anonymous notification that Renner's grant funding had been revoked. His research team disbanded. Renner retired the same year, citing undue pressure and personal risk. Over time, whispers of the Laurence event began to morph into legend. Some claimed the town had been contaminated by a government bioweapon. Others speculated that Laurence had become a site for psychological experimentation. The lack of physical evidence, no debris, no ruins, no structural remnants, only added to the mythos. But not all evidence was erased. A rare, undated photograph surfaced in 1998 from a deceased estate auction in Guelph. It showed a group of soldiers standing before a train car marked NB4 in bold black lettering. Behind them, a weathered station sign reads, Laurence sacked. The image was verified as genuine by photo analysts based on uniform styles and weathering patterns, placing it somewhere between 1914 and 1916. The back of the photo bore one sentence in faded pencil. We did what we had to do. Further investigation into Laurence led to an unlikely breakthrough in 2007. A group of amateur historians operating a private website dedicated to Canadian urban disappearances received an unmarked package. Inside were 8 photocopied pages, military memoranda, partial maps, and one heavily redacted transcript. At the top of the first page was the phrase, Emergency Directive Region 47C Authorization EV-9. The document described a response team being dispatched to Laurence following the reported breach of containment protocols. Terms like perimeter sterilization, transport interception, and disposal logistics appear multiple times throughout the pages, though most lines were blacked out. The final paragraph, partially legible, was the most disturbing. Civilian exposure exceeded acceptable thresholds. Full nullification initiated. Survivors processed. Structure removal scheduled within 48 hours. The materials were shared anonymously on the website, where they stayed for 3 days before the site was taken offline without explanation. The domain later reappeared, completely scrubbed of the Laurence content. The original researchers never publicly commented again. In 2012, in FOIA, Freedom of Information Act, request was submitted by a journalist investigating abandoned rail towns. The request asked directly for any records related to Laurence Junction, EV-9, or NB-4. The government response included only 3 lines. No records of Laurence Junction exist in federal settlement archives. Protocol EV9 refers to a decommissioned internal safety code. Facility NB4 is not recognized under any historical registry. What made this reply notable was not just the denial, but the specificity. The journalist had not included the term facility in the request. That language came from the agency itself, suggesting that they did know what NB4 was and chose to deny its legitimacy rather than its existence. The deeper the digging went, the stranger the coincidences became. A 1,937 academic article in a restricted military medical journal titled Psychogenic Effects of Rapid Displacement and Memory Suspension referenced a case study from southwestern Ontario, 1,915. Though it never mentioned Laurence by name, it described a population removed under duress, disoriented, relocated, and socially integrated under new identities. The article was pulled from all libraries in 1,942. A single photocopy survives in private hands. Another lead emerged from a leaked Royal Canadian Mounted Police internal training manual dated 1,974. One page, titled Legacy Zones, Areas of Persistent Caution, lists Zone 47C unauthorized entry prohibited. Field agents proceed with non-lethal deterrence if encountered. The page was quickly scrubbed from official copies, but remains archived by independent watchdog groups. Speculation has grown that Laurence may have been part of a broader pattern, a test case for federal erasure techniques. Some believe it was an early attempt at information control, executed with ruthless precision. Others theorize that what happened in Laurence was not only dangerous, but potentially replicable and therefore had to be suppressed completely. Still, some believe the answer may lie in the experimental cargo itself. If the contents of Train NB4 were chemical, biological, or even psychological in nature, if they were meant to test the boundaries of human control or resilience, then perhaps Laurence was chosen as a target, not for what it was, but for what it could endure. Or, more chillingly, for what it couldn't. To this day, the site believed to be Laurence remains unnaturally silent. No wildlife, no cellular signal, just wind. Some say the government is still watching that patch of earth. Some say they're not watching it anymore because they don't have to, because whatever happened there is over, or because it never really ended. June 10th, 1,915. By early evening, Laurence Junction appeared calm. Workers at the textile facility ended their shifts. Families gathered for supper. The 7:15 p.m. Bell rang as usual. Children played in the churchyard. Nothing seemed out of place. At 8:50, 2 p.m., the station log noted an unscheduled arrival. Train NB4, listed simply as Express Class X, do not unload. The train was 17 cars long. Each car was sealed, black, unmarked except for stencil codes. Eyewitnesses from neighboring farms reported an eerie low hum coming from the tracks, and described a flickering blue light in the sky above Laurence that night, similar to northern lights, but far too low and far too localized. The train stopped for 14 minutes. No cargo was removed. No passengers disembarked. Then, it moved again, not away from the station, but into the railyard sidetrack, toward the warehouse once used for military storage. That was the last confirmed visual of Train NB4. At 9:26 p.m., local telegraph operators recorded strange line behavior, overlapping static, code distortions, and an abrupt communication blackout. It lasted exactly 27 minutes. During this time, multiple nearby residents in the towns of Attercliffe and Tilsonburg noted deep, unplaceable noises, like thunder but without lightning. Some claimed to hear bursts of what sounded like sirens, though no local emergency drills were scheduled. One resident, a retired infantryman named Miles Dunham, recorded in his private journal, "Something's happening in Laurence. The sky is the wrong color. A sound like wind, but the trees are still." That entry, now held in a private museum, is time-stamped 9:48 p.m. At 10:12 p.m., the rail signal tower north of Laurence stopped transmitting entirely. At 10:19, all railway switchboards within a 20-mile radius went offline. This is the only known multi-node failure of Canada's early 20th century rail communication system not caused by weather or sabotage. The Ministry of Transport would later attribute the incident to power line fluctuations. Yet, weather logs from the Royal Meteorological Society recorded no anomalies that night. Conditions were clear, windless, and dry. No lightning, no solar flares, no external cause. Then came silence. From 10:30 p.m. onward, there were no transmissions, no sightings, no telegraph pings. The town of Laurence, a place with over 400 documented residents, a functioning station, schoolhouse, church, and factory, simply went dark. The following morning, at 6:45 a.m., a postal worker arriving from Oxford noticed something unusual. The Laurence turnoff road was barred, with a wooden barricade painted white. A man in military dress unmarked uniform told him the town had been quarantined. No further explanation was given. When a local pastor attempted to cross the field line into Laurence 2 days later, he was stopped by 4 armed men. He was told that the area was under federal restructuring. It never reopened. In the months that followed, efforts to document what had happened in Laurence were met with silence or subtle resistance. Cartographers were told to exclude Region 47C from updates due to administrative consolidation. Postal services rerouted, government maps reissued without the township. A place once present in dozens of registries simply ceased to exist on paper. But a handful of first-hand accounts did survive, scattered in personal letters, unpublished journals, and local folklore. One such account came from Sarah Lind, a nurse working in Tilsonburg at the time. Her letter to her cousin in Alberta, dated July 1915, reads, "3 came in tonight, all covered in ash. One couldn't speak. One kept repeating, 'They made us forget.' The third had burns, but no memory of how. Said they'd been in a town that isn't there anymore. I can't sleep." The identities of these individuals were never confirmed. No hospital logs match the event. But the letter exists verified by ink composition and envelope timestamp. A decade later, in 1926, an anonymous source mailed a phonograph cylinder to a provincial newspaper office. Inside was a short audio clip, scratchy and degraded, purportedly recorded on the night of Laurence's disappearance. Analysts disagree on its authenticity, but cleaned versions suggest a few discernible elements. A constant low-frequency hum, 2 sharp mechanical impacts, possibly explosions, a distant voice shouting, "Hold the car," and finally, a whisper-like distortion repeating what sounds like, "No one leaves." The recording was dismissed as a hoax. The cylinder was lost during archival relocation in 1953. As for what actually happened, no official version exists. But researchers have offered several leading theories, none of which can be fully proven or disproven. 1. Experimental containment breach. Train NB4 may have been carrying hazardous material, chemical, biological, or otherwise, from the mysterious NB4 facility. Something may have leaked or failed en route. Laurence, being remote, was then sealed off to prevent wider contamination. This theory is supported by the rapid silence, restricted entry, and terms like nullification found in EV9 documents. But it does not explain that total erasure towns have endured disasters before and remained on the map. 2. psychological test site. A more chilling theory suggests Laurence was a testbed not for weapons, but for erasure itself. That the population was exposed to some form of mass memory disruption, psychological conditioning, or controlled identity rewriting. Supporters of this theory point to scattered cases of individuals who claim to have grown up in a place with a church and trains, but no name. These accounts were often dismissed as fabricated childhood memories, but the pattern is disturbingly consistent. 3. Operation Blackout. A third theory, rooted in wartime intelligence procedures, claims Laurence was the first execution of a full blackout protocol, a top-secret method of rendering locations untraceable by eliminating their physical, bureaucratic, and social footprints. If such a protocol existed, Laurence would have been its pilot case, a success, terrifying, complete, and irreversible. In the decades since, the site remains undisturbed. Satellite scans show irregular soil patterns where foundations might have stood. Yet no excavation permits have ever been granted. Military airspace maps classify the area as closed for safety. Drones lose GPS. Wildlife trackers report no migratory activity in the region since 1916. Locals say it's just a cursed spot. Historians call it an administrative anomaly. But those who've stood near the field and listened say the wind there carries a sound you don't hear anywhere else. It hums. And sometimes, beneath the hum, you can almost make out the words, "Don't remember, don't remember, don't remember." More than a century has passed since the night Laurence vanished. And yet, no other site in Canada has remained so physically unmarked and emotionally radioactive. Drive down Highway 59 today, and you'll pass farmlands, empty fields, and the occasional line of weather-worn trees. But if you look closely just past the kilometer marker once referenced in outdated rail maps, there's a sudden emptiness. A clearing that feels too intentional, too quiet, not abandoned, but denied. There are no ruins, no plaques, no outlines of roads, homes, or fence posts. Not even the foundations of what once stood there. The only hint that Laurence ever existed is found not in brick or stone, but in the unexplained absences all around it. No wildlife nests in the central clearing. Birds detour. Insects avoid it. Trees near the border grow at odd angles, leaning away from the middle. Locals call it the silent acre. Some say they get headaches when passing by. Others say they hear nothing at all, not the wind, not their car engines, not even their own breathing. It is as though the land itself is holding its breath. Since the 1920s, this zone has been omitted from all official maps. Attempts to build on it have either failed due to soil instability or been revoked by federal orders. One developer who tried to construct a greenhouse project there in 1968 received a typed letter marked Property Inadvisable Ministerial Concern. No ministry was specified. Today, the land is classified as Region 47C, though no department publicly claims jurisdiction. But despite the silence, or perhaps because of it, the memories have not died. In nearby Tillsonburg, a retired schoolteacher named Helen Bradbury recalled in a 1997 oral history interview a strange incident from her youth. At age 9, during a family picnic in the late 1930s, she wandered too far into a field her father warned her not to enter. I found myself walking in a place that didn't sound right. It was like I stepped into a bubble. The birds stopped. The air was thick. I saw something that looked like a railway sign buried in the grass. It said, JCT. That's all I remember. My father found me minutes later, shaking. She paused in the interview, then whispered, "He never took us there again." And then there are the digital ghosts. In 2015, an amateur cartographer, using high-resolution satellite imaging, noticed a perfectly circular soil compression in the area. Measuring approximately 150 meters across, it contained no vegetation despite weeks of rainfall. Curious, he uploaded the coordinates to a public mapping forum. Within 24 hours, the satellite image was replaced with a lower resolution overlay. His account was suspended. But not before others saw what he had posted. The image showed what appeared to be a ring, a scorched outline, faint but visible like a burned scar in the earth. And at its center, what some believed to be the outline of a foundation, square, symmetrical, unclaimed. Even in silence, remnants break through. A girl in Woodstock was reported sleepwalking multiple nights in 2019. She drew pictures in her notebook trains without windows, black buildings, a bell tower with no bell. When asked what she was drawing, she said, "It's the place we're not allowed to think about." Her parents had never heard of Laurence. They later moved. The drawing stopped, but the notebook remained now kept by a local folklorist who's recorded 7 similar cases across Oxford County. None of these children ever met each other. None of them were taught about Laurence in school. And yet they all drew the same place. In a time when every inch of land is photographed, tagged, mapped, and owned, there remains one place that resists the very idea of memory. And that resistance, that emptiness, may itself be the greatest clue of all. Laurence is not gone. It has simply been made invisible. And invisibility, as it turns out, is more permanent than destruction. In 2022, an anonymous contributor uploaded a digital copy of a classified military briefing to a forgotten archive on the deep web. The file, titled EV9, Post Event Behavioral Management Protocol Addendum, was flagged and removed within hours, but not before a handful of users downloaded and mirrored it. The document was heavily redacted, but several lines stood out. Subjects from Zone 47C display persistent recall interference. Auditory hallucinations remain stable in frequency. Cognitive denial effective. Event memory degraded but not eliminated. Further observation necessary. Containment incomplete. The final line was underlined 3 times. EV 9 breach not resolved. Memory contamination probable. There was no author, no date, no insignia, just the feeling of something left open, a thread never tied off. For the scattered researchers who still dared to trace the outlines of Laurence, it was the closest thing to confirmation they had ever seen. A whisper carried through firewalls and server failures that said, yes, this really happened. But it was more than just a revelation. It was a warning. Because if the containment had failed, then the memory was returning. Over the last decade, subtle disturbances have multiplied in the surrounding regions. Forest cameras pick up brief flashes of structure where no buildings exist. Hikers report seeing tracks appear overnight, then vanish the next day. Distant whistles, perfectly rhythmic, recorded at 3:12 a.m. for 3 nights in a row, always in June. A father and daughter camping near the zone returned to find their phones wiped, photos replaced with distorted black images that flickered when viewed. Even stranger, the people reporting these events don't always remember doing so. One man emailed researchers a full account of a train in the trees. When asked for follow-up days later, he replied, "I never sent you anything." "What train?" And then there are the children. 7 independent reports, all within the last 5 years, of children under age 10 drawing the same scene. A train station with no tracks. A church with no windows. A tall figure holding a bell. They describe it without fear. Not as a nightmare, but as a place they've been to, though they don't remember when. Their parents insist they've never been told about Laurence. They don't even know what it is. But they know the shape of the steeple. They know the color of the grass. And they know one thing for sure. You're not supposed to go past the trees. So what truly happened in Laurence? Was it an accident? A containment breach of something never meant to be transported? Was it a sacrifice? A controlled experiment to see how cleanly a community could be erased from collective consciousness? Or was it something even darker? Not the failure of memory, but the weaponization of forgetting. A program to not only hide the past, but to sever it, to burn it at the root so no one could ever trace it back. We may never know the full extent. The archives are silent. The names are missing. The town is gone. But memory is a strange thing. It doesn't always obey the rules. Sometimes it finds cracks. Sometimes it grows in places it shouldn't. And sometimes, just sometimes, it refuses to die. So, if you find yourself driving through southern Ontario one night, and your radio goes quiet, and the GPS tells you to take a turn that doesn't exist, and you pass a clearing where the air feels wrong, and you swear, just for a moment, you hear the echo of a bell, don't stop, because that sound, that faint ringing, might be what's left of Laurence. And it might be calling you to remember what you were never supposed to know.